Why the South African Rand is weakening. Understanding the global and local dynamics introduction. The South African Rand, one of the most closely watched currencies in emerging markets, has recently weakened by 0.6%, trading at 18.7475 against the US dollar. This dip comes amid anticipation of key U.S. economic data releases, including the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC minutes, and employment reports, which are expected to provide insights into U.S. monetary policy. But why does U.S. data impact the Rand, and how do global and local factors contribute to its fluctuations? This explainer video unpacks the complexities behind the Rand's recent performance, highlighting the role of inflation, demand, and economic activity in shaping its trajectory. The influence of U.S. economic data. Global currencies like the South African Rand often respond to shifts in major economies, especially the United States. This week's U.S. economic reports, including jobless claims, payroll data, and the FOMC minutes, are critical because they provide clues about the Federal Reserve's future policy decisions. A strong labor market report, for example, could signal the need for further interest rate hikes to control inflation. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, the U.S. dollar becomes more attractive to investors due to higher returns on dollar-denominated assets. This often leads to a strengthening of the dollar, making other currencies, including the Rand, weaker in comparison. The anticipation of such a scenario has already put pressure on the Rand as investors reposition their portfolios in favor of the dollar. In this context, emerging market currencies like the Rand are particularly vulnerable. The uncertainty surrounding U.S. economic policies creates volatility in global markets, prompting capital outflows from riskier assets in emerging economies back to the relative safety of the dollar. Local factors amplifying the Rand's weakness. While global dynamics play a significant role, domestic factors in South Africa also contribute to the Rand's performance. The country's economic climate has been challenging, with private sector activity contracting in December for the first time since August. This decline, driven by weak demand and rising inflation, signals reduced business confidence and economic stagnation. Inflation exacerbates the situation by eroding the purchasing power of both businesses and consumers. A weaker Rand amplifies this issue as imported goods become more expensive, leading to higher costs for essential items like fuel, food, and machinery. For example, a 0.6% drop in the Rand's value can increase fuel prices significantly, directly affecting transportation and logistics costs. Additionally, South Africa's reliance on global trade means that fluctuations in its currency have a pronounced impact on its trade balance. Importers face higher costs, while exporters might benefit from a weaker Rand as their goods become more competitive internationally. However, this balance is often insufficient to offset the broader economic challenges. Understanding currency fluctuations. Currency movements are the result of complex interactions between supply and demand in the foreign exchange market. Factors such as inflation, interest rates, political stability, and economic growth all influence a currency's value. For the Rand, weak domestic demand, rising inflation, and external pressures from a strong dollar create a perfect storm of challenges. To simplify, imagine the currency market as a tug-of-war between buyers and sellers. When global investors perceive the dollar as a safer option due to U.S. economic strength, demand for the dollar increases while demand for the Rand decreases. This imbalance causes the Rand to lose value. Moreover, local inflation reduces South Africa's competitiveness, making its goods and services less attractive on the global stage. Coupled with declining private sector activity, this further weakens the Rand's position. The weakening of the South African Rand underscores the interconnectedness of global and local economic forces. U.S. monetary policy and South Africa's domestic challenges both play pivotal roles in shaping the currency's performance. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for businesses, policymakers, and consumers who feel the effects of a fluctuating Rand in their daily lives. As we await the release of U.S. economic data and its implications for global markets, the question remains: how can South Africa navigate these challenges to stabilize its economy and currency? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how the weakening Rand impacts your daily life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more in-depth analysis of global economic trends and their effects on emerging markets like South Africa. Rand versus dollar, a tale of two economies. The global foreign exchange market is often a mirror reflecting the economic health of nations. Recently, the South African rand weakened by 0.6%, trading at 18.7475 against the US dollar, raising concerns about its trajectory. Why is the rand struggling while the dollar appears to thrive? This comparative analysis dives into the stark differences between South Africa's economic challenges and the US's relative strength, offering insights into how these trends impact businesses and consumers in South Africa. Stay tuned as we unravel the dynamics behind currency fluctuations with real-world examples and relatable scenarios. The performance gap, rand versus dollar over time. When comparing the rand to the dollar, a striking divergence emerges. Over the past 5 years, the dollar has shown resilience, bolstered by a strong labor market and steady economic growth. Meanwhile, the rand has faced volatility, reflecting South Africa's struggles with inflation, weak demand, and slowing private sector activity. Charts reveal that the rand has consistently underperformed against the dollar, especially during global economic uncertainty. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic saw the rand plummet to over 19 zloty against the dollar in early 2020. While it rebounded in 2021, ongoing domestic issues and global pressures have kept it on a downward trajectory. This trend highlights the influence of U.S. monetary policy on emerging market currencies. The Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes make dollar-denominated investments more attractive, increasing demand for the dollar and putting pressure on currencies like the rand. Conversely, South Africa's limited monetary tools and slower economic growth make it harder to stabilize its currency. Diverging economic climates. The U.S. economy is a stark contrast to South Africa's. Recent U.S. economic data, including robust job creation and strong consumer spending, signals a healthy and growing economy. Unemployment remains low at around 4%, and industries across the board show resilience. This economic strength fuels confidence in the dollar, reinforcing its position as a global safe haven. In contrast, South Africa's private sector activity contracted in December for the first time since August, driven by rising inflation and declining demand. Weak economic performance translates to reduced investor confidence, further weakening the rand. For instance, South African businesses reliant on imports face higher costs due to the weak rand, impacting profit margins and consumer prices. A relatable example is the cost of imported electronics. A South African retailer importing laptops from the U.S. will now pay more due to the weaker rand. This cost increase is often passed on to consumers, making goods more expensive and reducing purchasing power. Real-world impact on businesses and consumers. The implications of this currency gap are felt keenly by South African businesses and consumers. Importers face rising costs, forcing them to raise prices or absorb losses. Exporters may benefit from a weaker rand as their products become more competitive in international markets, but this is often not enough to offset the broader economic strain. For consumers, the weakening rand means higher fuel and food prices. A simple trip to the grocery store now costs more as imported goods become pricier. This strain on household budgets reduces discretionary spending, further slowing economic growth. For businesses, the weak rand creates uncertainty. Companies that rely on imported machinery or raw materials face challenges in maintaining profitability. On the other hand, exporters of goods like wine or fruit may see increased demand from international buyers, offering a glimmer of hope in an otherwise challenging landscape. The comparison between the rand and the dollar highlights the contrasting economic realities of South Africa and the United States. While the U.S. benefits from robust growth and strong monetary policies, South Africa grapples with inflation, weak demand, and economic contraction. These dynamics not only explain the rand's struggles, but also underscore the broader challenges facing emerging markets in a volatile global economy. As we navigate these complexities, understanding the factors behind currency fluctuations can empower businesses and consumers to adapt and plan. What steps can South Africa take to strengthen its economy and stabilize the rand? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how these trends affect you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more insightful analysis of global economic trends shaping our world. What is the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, and why does it matter? Introduction. When it comes to global economic powerhouses, few entities wield as much influence as the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC. But what exactly does this committee do, and why do its decisions send ripples across global markets, including the South African rand? Whether you're a business owner, an investor, or simply curious about how the economy works, understanding the FOMC is key to grasping the interconnectedness of global markets. In this video, we'll break down the role of the FOMC, explain its decisions with relatable analogies, and highlight instances where U.S. monetary policy shaped economies worldwide. The role of the FOMC? Setting the tone for global markets. The FOMC is a branch of the U.S. Federal Reserve tasked with managing monetary policy to ensure economic stability, comprised of 12 members, including Federal Reserve governors and regional bank presidents. The FOMC meets regularly to decide on critical issues like interest rates, which influence borrowing, spending, and investment. At the heart of these meetings are discussions on whether to raise, lower, or maintain interest rates. For example, when inflation rises, the FOMC may increase rates to cool down the economy by making borrowing more expensive. Conversely, in times of recession, they may lower rates to stimulate economic activity. The committee's decisions are recorded in meeting minutes, which are analyzed worldwide to predict future monetary policies. Why does this matter globally? The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, meaning changes in U.S. monetary policy often have a cascading effect on other currencies, including the South African rand. Investors, businesses, and governments watch these minutes closely to adjust their strategies accordingly. Understanding FOMC concepts, relatable analogies. Think of the FOMC as the thermostat of the global economy. When the economy is overheating with high inflation, the FOMC raises rates to cool it down. When it's too cold during a slowdown, they lower rates to warm things up. This delicate balance affects everyone, from a small business in Johannesburg to a multinational corporation in New York. Interest rates, a key tool of the FOMC, are like the cost of borrowing money. Higher rates discourage people from taking loans, leading to less spending and investment. Lower rates, on the other hand, encourage borrowing, stimulating economic activity. However, these changes can significantly impact currencies. For instance, if the FOMC raises rates, the US dollar strengthens as it becomes more attractive to investors seeking higher returns, often weakening currencies like the rand in comparison. Consider this. If you're an importer in South Africa, and the rand weakens due to a strong dollar, your costs for U.S.-sourced goods increase. Conversely, a stronger dollar might make South African exports more competitive in international markets. These dynamics illustrate the far-reaching implications of the FOMC's decisions. Past instances of FOMC influence on emerging markets history provide several examples of the FOMC's impact on global economies. During the 2013 taper tantrum, when the Federal Reserve hinted at reducing its quantitative easing program, emerging market currencies, including the rand, plummeted. Investors withdrew capital from riskier markets in favor of the dollar, causing economic strain in many countries. More recently, the FOMC's aggressive rate hikes to combat inflation in 2022 led to significant capital outflows from emerging markets. As U.S. interest rates rose, the dollar strengthened, and currencies like the rand experienced volatility. This shift increased the cost of dollar-denominated debt for emerging economies, further exacerbating financial challenges. These instances underscore why the FOMC's decisions are not just U.S. news, they are global events with real consequences for markets and people around the world. The Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, is a cornerstone of global economic stability, influencing everything from currency values to the cost of goods and services. Its role as the thermostat of the economy makes its decisions critical for investors, businesses, and policymakers worldwide. Understanding the FOMC's impact helps us navigate a world where global and local economies are deeply interconnected. Have you ever wondered how changes in the dollar affect your daily life or business? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more insights into the forces shaping the global economy. Stay informed and join the conversation about the FOMC and its ripple effects on the world. What's next for the South African rand? A forecast of challenges and opportunities. Introduction. The South African rand has faced significant challenges recently, with its value slipping by 0.6% to trade at 18.7475 against the US dollar. As global and domestic economic forces collide, many are wondering, what does the future hold for the rand? This week's anticipated U.S. economic data, including Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC minutes, and employment reports, adds another layer of complexity to the rand's trajectory. In this forecast, we'll explore how these global factors, coupled with South Africa's inflation and weak demand, could shape the currency's path. Stay tuned as we delve into best and worst-case scenarios highlighting the key factors driving the rand's future. The role of U.S. economic data on the rand. The U.S. dollar often serves as a benchmark for global currencies, and this week's economic data could further strengthen its position. Reports on job openings, payroll numbers, and jobless claims are expected to paint a picture of a robust U.S. economy. If the Federal Reserve signals a continuation of tight monetary policy, the dollar is likely to strengthen further, putting additional pressure on the rand. When the dollar strengthens, emerging market currencies like the rand often weaken as investors shift capital to dollar-denominated assets offering higher returns. This dynamic creates a ripple effect, making imports more expensive for South Africa and exacerbating inflationary pressures. For example, a 1% appreciation in the dollar could increase the cost of importing goods like electronics and machinery, directly impacting South African businesses and consumers. This interdependence highlights why U.S. economic data is a critical factor in forecasting the rand's future performance. Domestic pressures on the rand. While global forces play a significant role, South Africa's domestic challenges also weigh heavily on the rand. The country's private sector activity contracted in December, driven by weak demand and rising inflation. These issues signal reduced business confidence and slower economic growth, creating a less favorable environment for the rand to recover. Inflation is a particularly pressing concern, as it erodes purchasing power and increases the cost of living. For instance, rising food and fuel prices have strained household budgets, leaving less room for discretionary spending. This reduced demand negatively affects local businesses, perpetuating a cycle of economic stagnation. Additionally, South Africa's energy crisis, marked by frequent load shedding, further dampens economic productivity. Businesses face higher operational costs, and foreign investors may view these challenges as risks, reducing their appetite for rand-denominated investments. Forecast best and worst-case scenarios. The rand's future hinges on a delicate balance of global and domestic factors. In a best-case scenario, the U.S. economic data shows a slight cooling of the labor market, reducing the likelihood of aggressive Federal Reserve rate hikes. This could weaken the dollar, providing relief to the rand. Domestically, if inflation moderates and demand picks up, the rand could stabilize around 18.50 against the dollar. In a worst-case scenario, robust U.S. economic data strengthens the dollar, while South Africa's inflation and weak demand persist. This could push the rand beyond 19 poisson against the dollar, making imports more expensive and further straining the economy. Such a scenario could lead to higher interest rates from the South African Reserve Bank to counter inflation, creating additional challenges for businesses and consumers. A moderate scenario sees the rand hovering around current levels, reflecting a tug-of-war between global and local pressures. In this case, economic reforms and investments in infrastructure could provide a long-term path to recovery. The South African rand's future is shaped by both external forces, like U.S. economic data, and internal challenges, including inflation and weak demand. While the road ahead may be uncertain, understanding these dynamics can help businesses, policymakers, and individuals make informed decisions. What do you think lies ahead for the rand? Will global factors or domestic reforms play a bigger role in its recovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more insights into the forces shaping currencies and economies worldwide. Key economic data releases to watch this week, what they mean for global markets introduction. This week, all eyes are on the release of crucial economic data from the United States, with ripple effects expected across global markets. From payroll, figures, and jobless claims to the Purchasing Managers' Index (PMI, these reports provide valuable insights into the health of the U.S. economy. But why do these numbers matter? And how could they impact emerging economies like South Africa? In this video, we'll break down the key data releases, their potential global implications, and how they might influence currencies, trade, and investment. Get ready for a visually engaging exploration of the week's most important economic events, major economic data releases to watch. The week kicks off with the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, JOLTS, offering a snapshot of U.S. labor market strength. A high number of job openings often signals economic resilience, while a decline could indicate slowing growth. Midweek, the ADP National Employment Report and weekly jobless claims will further clarify the state of employment. These metrics set the stage for the week's main event, the Non-Farm Payroll (NFP) report, which reveals how many jobs the U.S. economy added or lost in the past month. In addition to employment data, the PMI for services provides a pulse check on business activity in one of the largest sectors of the U.S. economy. A PMI reading above 50 indicates expansion, while a number below 50 signals contraction. Together, these reports give investors, policymakers, and businesses the information they need to gauge economic trends and make decisions. For emerging markets like South Africa, this data matters because it influences U.S. monetary policy. A strong U.S. economy could lead the Federal Reserve to maintain or even raise interest rates, strengthening the dollar and putting pressure on other currencies, including the rand. Global implications: emerging economies in the spotlight. When U.S. economic data points to robust growth, the dollar often strengthens as investors seek the safety of U.S. assets. This trend impacts emerging markets where currencies like the i.e. South African rand often weaken in response. A stronger dollar makes imports more expensive for South Africa, raising costs for businesses and consumers alike. For instance, a 1% appreciation in the dollar can increase the price of South African imports by a similar margin. This effect is particularly significant for goods like fuel and machinery, which are critical to the economy. On the flip side, a strong dollar can make South African exports more competitive, potentially boosting trade balances. Beyond currency impacts, U.S. economic data also shapes global investor sentiment. Positive reports could lead to capital outflows from riskier markets, reducing liquidity in emerging economies. This dynamic underscores the interconnectedness of global markets, where seemingly local events in the U.S. have far-reaching effects, making complex data accessible. To help viewers understand these intricate dynamics, we'll use animations and infographics to simplify complex data. Imagine a graph showing the correlation between U.S. payroll growth and the dollar index, or an animated map highlighting how changes in PMI numbers influence global trade routes. For example, a visual timeline can illustrate how past PMI contractions led to Federal Reserve rate cuts, followed by shifts in emerging market currencies. Such visuals make it easier to connect the dots between seemingly disparate data points and their real-world implications. These tools aren't just informative, they're engaging. By turning raw data into stories, we aim to empower viewers with the knowledge they need to navigate the global economy confidently. This week's economic data releases are more than just numbers. They are signals shaping the global economy. From the U.S. labor market to PMI figures, these reports provide critical insights that influence currencies, trade, and investment decisions worldwide. For emerging economies like South Africa, the implications are especially significant as shifts in the dollar ripple through markets and everyday life. What are your thoughts on this week's economic events? How do you think they will affect global and local markets? Share your insights in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more updates on the stories shaping our world. The ripple effects of a weak rand. How it shapes South Africa's economy. The South African rand has faced significant challenges, recently weakening to 18.7475 against the US dollar. While currency fluctuations may seem like distant financial data, they have a direct impact on everyday life, from rising grocery bills to increased business costs. How does a weak rand ripple through South Africa's economy, and what does it mean for consumers, businesses, and the broader economic landscape? In this analysis, we'll explore the effects on importers, exporters, inflation, and interest rates using real-world examples to bring the story to life. Importers versus exporters, two sides of the coin. One of the most immediate impacts of a weakening rand is felt by importers. South Africa relies heavily on imported goods, including fuel, machinery, electronics, and food products. When the rand loses value, these goods become more expensive. For instance, a laptop priced at $1,000 would cost R 18,740 centavos today, compared to R 17,500 just a few months ago. This increase in import costs often translates to higher prices for consumers, creating a strain on household budgets. On the flip side, exporters stand to benefit from a weaker rand. Goods priced in rands become more competitive in international markets, potentially boosting demand for South African products like wine, fruit, and minerals. For example, a bottle of South African wine priced at R100 becomes relatively cheaper for a buyer in Europe when the rand weakens. This competitiveness can help improve trade balances and generate much-needed revenue for the country. However, the balance isn't always straightforward. Many exporters rely on imported components for production, meaning they too face higher costs. This dual impact complicates the narrative, underscoring the complexity of currency fluctuations. Inflation and interest rates, a double-edged sword. A weak rand contributes to rising inflation as higher import costs drive up the prices of goods and services. Everyday items like groceries and gas become more expensive, eroding consumers' purchasing power. For example, when the rand weakens by 5%, fuel prices can rise by a similar percentage, increasing transportation costs and affecting the price of goods across the board. Inflation doesn't just hit consumers. It forces the South African Reserve Bank, SARB, to act. To combat inflation, the SARB may raise interest rates, making borrowing more expensive for businesses and households. While higher interest rates can stabilize the rand by attracting foreign investment, they also slow down economic growth by discouraging spending and investment. This delicate balancing act highlights the challenges policymakers face in managing the economy amid currency volatility. Decisions to stabilize inflation often come at the cost of economic expansion, creating tough trade-offs for the country's leadership. The everyday impact: groceries, gas, and beyond. For the average South African, the weakening rand is felt most acutely in daily expenses. Grocery bills have risen as imported food items like wheat and cooking oil become more expensive. A loaf of bread, for instance, now costs significantly more than it did a year ago due to higher global wheat prices compounded by the weak rand. Fuel costs are another pain point. With South Africa importing most of its fuel, a weaker rand translates to higher prices at the pump. A liter of petrol that cost R15 a few years ago now exceeds R25, making transportation more expensive for individuals and businesses alike. These rising costs ripple through the economy, affecting everything from public transport fares to the price of goods delivered to stores. Consumers also face higher costs for durable goods like electronics and appliances as businesses pass on increased import costs. This strain on purchasing power reduces discretionary spending, impacting sectors like retail and hospitality. The ripple effects of a weak rand touch every corner of South Africa's economy, from importers grappling with rising costs to exporters navigating a competitive but complex global market. Inflation and interest rate policies further compound these challenges, making it essential for businesses, policymakers, and consumers to adapt. As South Africa navigates these economic headwinds, what steps can be taken to stabilize the rand and mitigate its impact on daily life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more insights into the forces shaping our economy and the strategies we can use to thrive. Global influences on emerging market currencies. A focus on the rand. Emerging market currencies like the South African rand are facing a turbulent ride amid shifting global economic dynamics. From U.S. monetary policies to local economic challenges, the rand's performance mirrors broader trends impacting currencies worldwide. How do global market trends influence emerging markets, and what does this mean for South Africa's economy? In this panel discussion, we'll examine the interplay between U.S. economic data and South Africa's domestic challenges, highlight insights from financial experts, and explore potential solutions for stabilizing the rand in these uncertain times. Global trends: how U.S. economic data impacts the rand. The performance of emerging market currencies like the rand is heavily influenced by global economic trends, particularly those emanating from the United States. The U.S. dollar serves as a global benchmark, and when U.S. economic indicators such as job growth, inflation rates, and Federal Reserve policies signal strength, the dollar tends to rise. This creates a safe haven effect where investors pull capital from riskier markets like South Africa, leading to a weakening of currencies like the rand. For instance, last week's U.S. employment report showed robust job growth, which bolstered expectations of further interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve. This news strengthened the dollar while simultaneously putting pressure on the rand, which fell 0.6% in response. The connection is clear. Stronger U.S. economic data often spells trouble for emerging markets reliant on foreign investment. However, this relationship isn't one-sided. South Africa's economic performance also plays a role. Weak domestic demand, inflationary pressures, and energy crises such as load shedding further exacerbate the rand's vulnerability. This combination of global and local challenges creates a volatile environment for the currency. Insights from experts bridging global and local factors. Experts in global finance emphasize the importance of understanding the interconnected nature of today's markets. According to financial analyst Rachel Stevens, emerging markets like South Africa are caught in a delicate balancing act. While global forces like U.S. monetary policy shape capital flows, domestic reforms and economic resilience can mitigate some of these impacts. South African economist Sipho Makize adds, the rand's performance isn't just about external shocks, it's also a reflection of local economic fundamentals, addressing inflation, improving energy supply, and boosting investor confidence are key to stabilizing the currency. The panel also touched on the role of trade balances. For example, a stronger rand could reduce export competitiveness, but excessive weakness raises the cost of imports, fueling inflation. This highlights the need for a nuanced approach to managing the currency's value. Solutions for stabilizing the rand in today's global economic climate requires a multifaceted strategy. On the global front, South Africa needs to remain vigilant about U.S. monetary policy developments while diversifying its sources of foreign investment to reduce reliance on volatile capital flows. Bilateral trade agreements with emerging markets in Asia and Africa could provide alternative sources of economic stability. Domestically, addressing structural issues like load shedding and fostering business-friendly policies are crucial steps. For example, reducing bureaucratic hurdles for foreign investors and prioritizing infrastructure development could attract long-term capital inflows, helping stabilize the rand. Moreover, the South African Reserve Bank, SARB, plays a pivotal role. By balancing interest rate adjustments with inflation control, the SARB can maintain confidence in the rand without stifling economic growth. Coordinating fiscal and monetary policies will be essential for creating a conducive environment for investment and trade. The South African rand's trajectory highlights the delicate interplay between global market trends and domestic challenges. While U.S. economic data continues to influence investor sentiment, South Africa's ability to address local issues, like inflation and energy supply, will determine the rand's resilience. As we navigate these complexities, what steps do you think are most critical for stabilizing the rand? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join the conversation about the future of South Africa's economy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more in-depth analyses of global trends and their impact on emerging markets. How does a weak rand affect you? Join the conversation. The South African rand has been facing significant challenges, recently weakening to 18.7475 against the US dollar. But what does this mean for you personally? From rising grocery bills to higher fuel costs, a weak rand has real-life impacts on households, businesses, and the economy. In this video, we're turning the spotlight on you. How has the weakening rand affected your daily life? Have you noticed price increases or changes in your spending habits? Share your experiences, participate in our polls, and let's start a conversation about what this means for all of us. Everyday impacts, rising costs, and tight budgets. For many South Africans, the effects of a weak rand are most visible in rising prices for everyday items. Groceries, fuel, and imported goods have all become more expensive, putting pressure on household budgets. Have you noticed your monthly grocery bill climbing? For example, a loaf of bread or a bottle of cooking oil now costs significantly more than it did a year ago. Fuel costs are another major concern. With South Africa importing most of its oil, a weak rand means higher petrol prices. This increase doesn't just impact drivers, it raises transportation costs, which are passed on to consumers through higher prices for goods and services. How has this affected your commute or business expenses? We want to hear from you. Have you had to make changes to your spending habits? Are you cutting back on luxuries or finding creative ways to save? Share your stories in the comments or participate in our polls to let us know how you're navigating these challenges. Your voice matters. What do you think should be done? The weakening rand isn't just about numbers, it's about people. We're inviting you to share your thoughts on how the government, businesses, and communities can address these economics challenges. Do you believe the government should focus on stabilizing inflation or attracting foreign investment? Should the South African Reserve Bank raise interest rates to strengthen the rand, even if it means higher borrowing costs? Take part in our survey. What do you think is the biggest impact of the weak rand on your life? What action do you believe would help stabilize the economy? We'll feature some of your responses in our next video, highlighting the diverse perspectives of South Africans navigating these uncertain times. Join the conversation. Share your story. The weakening rand affects all of us in different ways, and your story matters. Whether you're a business owner struggling with import costs or a student adjusting to higher prices, we want to hear how this economic trend is impacting your life. Share your experiences in the comments below, participate in our polls, and stay tuned for future videos where we feature your insights and ideas. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more updates and conversations about the issues that matter most to South Africans. Let's work together to understand and address these challenges, one story at a time.